Zach Cohen is here. He covers the NBA draft at RealGM.com. I want to start with last night's national title game. Michigan, they end up being the champions, but I thought UConn, perfect game plan in that one. They slowed the pace down, long possessions, really tried to kind of get that game in the mud, but Michigan at the end of the day, they had more talent. They also made their threes. Among the talented guys on Michigan, Yaxel Lendeborg. Did I get that? I think I got that.
Lendeborg, yeah.
Lendeborg. Michigan's best player, potential top 10 pick in this draft. He was hurt in the previous round, battled through ankle and knee injuries to play in that game, but clearly did not look right in the national title game. Did him playing help or hurt his draft stock?
I'm of the belief that you're really not changing your draft stock much in the NCAA tournament. I know that that's not what people want to hear. I think that people like the idea of people playing their way into the lottery at the most important time of the season. But I do think that Lendeborg's not going to be dinged for playing through an injury. If anything, I think that it shows some toughness that he was willing to gut it out on 1 day rest. I think that looked like a pretty significant injury that he dealt with on Saturday, and I thought that he looked a lot slower and hampered by that injury, and then coming back out and just playing on Monday, I thought was nice to see. But yeah, player that I really do enjoy watching, and I think he's going to be a high-level role player in the NBA.
High-level role player, right? And that's mostly because of, his skill set, obviously, but also on the older side, 23 years old as a prospect, you kind of see him topping out as like a high-end role player then.
Yeah, I don't really see the path to stardom for him. I think he's very good at a lot of different things. I don't think he's necessarily great at any one thing, but I do think he's proven now to be a winner. He's proven that he can do a little bit of everything. I think that he's going to contribute both offensively and defensively. And this is the type of guy that if you're a playoff team, you'd love to just kind of bring him into the mix in the 16 to 30 range.
I know you pretty much just said you don't believe in this, but who helped themselves the most in the tournament in terms of draft stock?
It still does happen, so I will say that. But I think there's a few answers. I think the boring one, or the obvious one, is Darius Acuff Jr., who, across the SEC tournament and March Madness, 100% shot up draft boards. I think that that's a guy with a special on-ball ability to just kind of, control a game as a point guard, but also just light it up as a scorer. I heard Calipari say that, he's like a Chris Paul-esque type of floor general. And I tend to agree. I think that the concerns with Acuff are whether or not he's good enough defensively to play in a postseason setting. But I think you worry about that way down the road. I do think that he has played himself into the fourth spot in this draft. I think that, Caleb Wilson was there for the longest time. And maybe, a team does still fall in love with that size and athleticism that Wilson possesses. But after the top three, I think that Acuff has done enough to kind of make himself the most, enticing option there. But other than that, I do think two other players that kind of help themselves, Isaiah Evans from Duke and Nate Ament from Tennessee, two guys that kind of flamed out in their final games, but they did play well leading up to that, with Evans kind of stepping up in terms of shot creation for a Duke team that desperately needed it. Outside of Boozer, that team was somewhat weak offensively. And then Ament is a guy that just he is a 3-and-D prototype 100%. I don't see much more upside than that, but over the course of the season, earlier in the year, he really wasn't shooting that well. Defensively, I think he was a little disappointing, but kind of in the second half of the year and in the postseason, you saw everything that he has to offer, which is almost like an American version of a Zachary Risachet.
So I'm I'm at the first floor of my draft prep right now. I have done very little of it. I'm mostly NBA. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because after the tournament, it's just a great way for me to kind of catch up on what's going on. The fact that you said Evans, though, as one of these guys who's helped himself in the tournament, I'm so glad you said that, because it does back up my own eye test thing. As a very much of an amateur doing this, and like I said, not having done very little homework on this, there were Duke games or portions of Duke games where you watch it and you're like, oh, he's their best player, not Boozer, right? I thought he was tremendous, and I'd be interested to see if he ends up going middle first round, what's his sort of lane right now?
Yeah, I think it's middle to end of first round. I also think that there's a chance that he ends up going back. I don't know for sure that he will be in the draft, but I do think this is a player that, is going to be a very good pro. And you just kind of look at the size he has at 6'6", with decent length, the shooting that he possesses, which is 36% 3-point shooter, very, very confident, not just from three, but also stepping in and taking pull-up jumpers. I agree with you. There were points early in the first 3 rounds where it looked like he was their best player. I think a lot of that does have to do with the attention that Boozer demands, but it is going to be interesting to see what he looks like with NBA spacing, because it's just kind of the second, maybe even third year in a row where I think the Duke just played like an ugly brand of basketball and a slow brand of basketball where not a lot of players were able to really show what they can do offensively, which is why I think you see the big leap from like Con Knipple from last year to this year, where this setting just wasn't great for him to kind of show what he can do. Now we see with NBA spacing that he's a much better player than he showed at Duke. And I think you're going to see that with Boozer, and I think you're going to see it with Evans.
I want to go back to Acuff because he's fascinating to me. And this is exactly the kind of player that I need your help on, because I have done zero work on this guy. But smaller guard, the defensive things we get, you need to be so good offensively in today's NBA to really just be worth being a top pick and just being out there. We've seen small guards who felt like they had that offensive talent not pan out, whether it's a Rob Dillingham or a Scoot Henderson or some of these other players that have gotten picked in the top 10. They're not good enough offensively. And the kind of weird kind of key to all of this, you got to be pretty good offensively right away to get on the court so that you can continue to blossom offensively, understanding that you're never going to be that good defensively. But coaches don't want to play these rookies because they are so bad defensively. So it's kind of this double-edged sword thing. Is Acuff that guy offensively? Like, if you're talking about floor general, like if Calipari is comparing him to Chris Paul, like that sounds nice. I don't know how much utility there is for that kind of player in today's NBA, though.
Yeah, I mean, you just said it really well. Like, these players are just kind of disappearing. Like, you saw Trae Young given away at the deadline. You see Ja Morant has no market in the NBA right now. He's going to have to be stellar in order to live up to his draft slot and be, an all-star caliber player. So it is really going to depend on fit, I think. Like, this is a guy that I think is perfect to be playing for like Jordi Fernandez in Brooklyn, who seems to be the type of coach that can maximize talent in every way imaginable. And we haven't really seen Jordi have to coach like a winning team yet. So maybe we don't know what it's going to look like in terms of like hiding a player like Acuff defensively. But I do think the difference between Acuff and the players that we just mentioned, like Scoot and Dillingham, is like there's an advanced level of polish that he has that just keeps offenses running. Like, it's not just him scoring or setting up an assist. It's also like the hockey assist, getting guys in the right spots. It's all like kind of going towards the one goal of winning a game. And he has the 3-level scoring ability on top of that. I think the size is going to be big. Like, his measurements will be big. He looks 6'3" is what he's listed as. People do say he's a little bit stronger than he's listed as, but I do kind of wonder if he's 6'1", 6'2", if that causes him to drop a little.
Who's the best player in the draft?
I think it's Boozer. I think that like there's so much out there in terms of negativity with Boozer and people just saying he's a bully ball player, but I think that really undersells some of his perimeter skills already. Like, this is a guy that really can knock down threes, even though the form isn't maybe the greatest looking, but also just an elite passer, high feel guy. I think that those types of players have proven to be very translatable in the NBA. And I think that I keep seeing people like compare him to Kevin Love in an almost negative way. But if Kevin Love is the number 1 pick in this draft, you're pretty damn happy about grabbing him at number 1. So I think Boozer is going to be the best player in this draft, but I do think it's close enough amongst the top 3 that like I can understand a team drafting based on need and fit. I think that those 3 players are all phenomenal.
All right, we're going to do a tankathon spin really quick. Utah ends up with the number 1 pick. Who should they take?
They will take Dybantsa. I feel like this whole state of Utah has like invested in his whole life. So I think that they will take Dybantsa if he is there. I think it would make sense. You just give yourself this massive front line of Dybantsa, Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr. playing Ace Bailey at the 2, and all of a sudden you're like the biggest team in the league and one of the most interesting teams in the league. So I would love to see Dybantsa with the Jazz.
I just did another spin. Sacramento has the number 1 pick. Who should they take?
That is a team where I'd be looking at Boozer. I think that they could really use a hit right away and somebody that can play immediately. I'm a little bit nervous that Sacramento will go Acuff and he would end up being the worst version of himself, because I do think that team has just been open about wanting to address the point guard situation, which they have completely fumbled in the last like 5 to 7 years. But yeah, I think that Boozer would be good there.
I agree. One more spin. Atlanta shot up 9 spots. Who should they take number 1?
See, this is the one where I actually think that Peterson might make some sense because you just let Trae Young go out the door. I do think Peterson has a pretty high floor. I just think the question is whether or not the upside we saw in high school is still there, because like, to set the tone with Peterson for people that didn't really watch him at all this season, this is a guy that was such an explosive, like, downhill driver and athlete in high school. And then he got to college and all of that went away and he became really a jump shooter, off-ball mover, like movement shooter type. And there were still some flashes of like on-ball excellence, but he should probably be playing the point guard spot in the NBA or like a combo guard situation. But it's just so different from what we saw in high school and what we saw as a freshman that you just have no idea what you're going to get out of him. But even if you're getting that shooter and scorer that you saw at Kansas, I still think you're getting a very high level player. So if I'm Atlanta and I think I need more help at the guard spot, I think that's where I go with Peterson.
This is one of those examples of my lack of draft prep, because I have watched zero Darryn Peterson high school tape. And so I watched Kansas and I'm like, this is a guy who's kind of being forced into this not forced. This guy's a guy who's kind of playing a 3-and-D type of role. And you look at his length and everything, like, he should probably be a pretty good defender. I don't know that that's his calling card, but his athleticism is obvious. The fact that he was playing sort of more of a spot up role. A lot has been focused in terms of Darryn Peterson. A lot of the focus has been on, why is this guy sitting out games with various injuries? Does he really have that extra it factor? All these things. But you just brought up to me the most interesting question. Why on earth, if this guy was this explosive with the ball in his hands in high school, and every draft expert that you talk to, anybody that has paid any attention to this draft says, look at the high school tape with Darryn Peterson, look at the high school tape with him, and you're going to change your mind about Darryn Peterson as a player. Why on earth is Bill Self playing him in this role instead of being on the ball? Is that being asked?
It's a huge mystery. I mean, I just think that like maybe there's something happening behind the scenes where this guy just is not willing to push his body the way that he did in high school. Maybe he's trying to steer himself somewhere to one of the teams in the lottery. I really don't know. It was just kind of shocking to see like the difference in athleticism and just like the eye test of who this person was in high school and who he was in college. There's really no answer for it that I've heard that's good. I've seen like the articles now, talking about how he had full body cramps early in the year. That kind of played with his mind as the season progressed. So maybe it was that. Maybe he was just a little bit nervous about pushing himself, but it will be interesting to see what the NBA version of him looks like, because the upside is still super high if he's going to be someone you roll the ball out to and hope that athleticism comes back. The elevator pitch for him, like coming out of high school, was like Westbrook with a jumper.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, the athleticism does stand out no matter what. Fair to say, based on our conversation, correct me if I'm wrong, your top 3 would be in order: Booza, Dybantsa, Peterson?
Yes, that would be my order. I think that Peterson has a little bit more upside than Dybantsa, but I do think that would be my top 3.
Dybantsa's best comp is who?
Oh, that's a little bit tough. It's like a smaller Julius Randle is what I've seen a lot of people say, but that doesn't sound great, so I don't really want to do it. Maybe like a little bit of Jaylen Brown in there. It's tough to do a player comp for him, but I can say like with certainty that that's a guy that you could throw on the floor from day one and expect 17 to 18 points. Like, he is just so polished as a scorer. I think that the jumper definitely needs to improve, but the moves he has, the counters, all of the stuff that he can do to create offense for himself, to handle the ball a little bit. You saw towards the end of last season that like Richie Saunders, BYU's second best player and best shooter, got injured, and then all of a sudden it's just the Dybantsa show. He's scoring like 40 and 10 every night. So I think that you could expect him to be special from day one.
This last draft class we had stocked super deep. I think we're going to look back on this last draft class as one of maybe the deeper classes we've had in a really long time. And obviously, you've got Knipple and Dylan Harper and some of these guys at the very top. Cooper Flagg, obviously, that we all like. It feels like this draft has a very clear top, and we feel good about the top players in this draft. But how deep is this class?
So I think it's really deep, because I think that there's a huge number of like on-ball guards that can really make, a difference at the NBA level, whether you're talking about like Acuff or Keaton Wagler, Mikal Brown Jr. There are so many guards in this draft that I think are going to be starter level players in the NBA. And I just think that that's going to end up making people almost like think of point guards as an afterthought, because you're going to feel like you can get one later in the draft. But there's so many good players in this draft. I think that, if you're talking about like actual like all-star types, I think maybe you're talking about 7 or 8 players. But in terms of like contributors down the board, I think it's going to be really deep with very good players, like even like a Joshua Jefferson from Iowa State, somebody that I keep seeing mocked in the second round. That's somebody I think is going to be very good. So I just drafts like 40, 50 deep with like starter level talent. I really think it's going to be a special class.
Who has the most at stake, maybe to lose or to gain over whatever this next process is? We're gonna have the measurements come in. You know, you're gonna start having in person workouts with teams, all of this stuff, right? Like the tournament's over, the basketball season's over, everything on the court is over. But a lot of the boards change now because you talk to people around the league, they start diving into the film. You start thinking about players a little bit differently than you did when you were watching them live in person during the course of the season. So you've got the film work stuff, you've got the interview stuff, and you've got some of the combine measurement stuff that's going to come out here. Who do you think maybe has the most at stake in terms of, maybe let's stay positive. Like, who has the most to gain throughout this process, do you think?
I think Jaden Quaintance from Kentucky is a name you're going to hear a lot for that type of question, and also the type of guy that like has some untapped potential that we didn't see in college. I mean, this was a player that at Arizona State as a freshman, he looked the part of like the best defender in all of college basketball, and he transfers to Kentucky after tearing his ACL in Tempe. Got a huge NIL offer from Kentucky. Didn't play much this year. Like he had injuries. The fit didn't work out. Whatever it was just a weird season for him. But he's going to be a pro next year. This is a guy that I do think could be just a highly impactful defender that can defend 1 through 5. I've seen some people say like to get him under like Draymond Green and Golden State would be like the perfect situation for him because he could kind of develop somewhat slowly while picking, that brain. But that is a good comp for him defensively. Like he really is special in terms of defending the rim and being switchable on the perimeter, but offensively leaves quite a bit to be desired. He's really more of a rim runner, not much of a shooter, not a great free throw shooter. So he's going to have to prove himself in workouts.
Have you started doing your player comps yet?
I haven't done too many player props. I could give you some for some players if you want to throw some at me.
I asked you because did you come up with one yet that you love? You're like, oh, this is the perfect player comp. I feel really good that I kind of had this pull.
I think that like Keaton Wagler is like an SGA that can't play defense. It's okay. SGA is just a special talent, and it's so hard to even compare him. But like, offensively, you watch the two of them, and it's very, very similar. I think Michael Brown Jr., who I mentioned before, very similar to Trae Young in terms of what he can do as a shooter off the bounce and just how good of a passer he is, in pick and roll actions and all of that. I think that he's just an electric playmaker that is kind of like a bigger version of a Trae Young. But yeah, I haven't really dug too deep into the player comps, but that's the best I can do.
All right, last thing I want to do with you here. Again, somebody who has not started his draft prep, I'm going to ask for your help. I'm going to ask you to play matchmaker for players that I like. So you're an NBA draft expert. You do great work for us over at RealGM.com. You're diving into all these players. You've got an opinion on all of these players. I don't do that. I love the draft prep part of this, but I tend to zero in on just players that I like and just be like, oh, and then I root for them to go to places that I think they'd be good fits. So I have I typically have like archetypes of player types that I like and that I gravitate towards. So I'm basically going to ask you to play matchmaker for me. And these are some of the archetypes and traits that I look for in players during draft prep. And I'm basically going to ask you to steer me in the right direction. So when I say I love the most competitive player in the draft, what's the name that you think of?
Man, I think Kingston Flemings might be the one that comes up, the Houston guard, who I think if there's going to be a guard that ends up outperforming the others in that loaded kind of point guard spot, it's going to be him, because I think the way that he competes as a defender on the ball, the way that he just is poised offensively and contributes to winning basketball. I mean, playing as a freshman for that team, Kelvin Sampson, is just very difficult, and to do it at the level he did it at was very, very impressive. So I think that's a player that really does have a lot of edge to him, and I think he's going to be really, really good right from day one. I think this is a guy that like has Drew Holiday potential in the NBA.
Love that. Player with question marks that are obvious, but the analytics love. And I'm going to give you an example of what I mean by this. Like Reed Shepherd, for instance, was this analytics darling coming out of Kentucky a couple of years ago, but the obvious flaw was that he's small, right? Or you think about Tyrese Halliburton. Everybody loved his analytics coming out of Iowa State, said he was one of the best players in this draft, but you're like, he shoots kind of weird. We don't really know what position he is. So there's some obvious questions there. Turns out that Halliburton's awesome, and I think Reed Shepard is pretty awesome too, but, jury's still out, I guess, on him. Who is like that? With obvious questions, but the analytics just love this player.
I think it's Bennett Sturts from Iowa, and I already wrote this up over at RealGM, but like you look at him play and you think it's like a slow point guard that can really only shoot off the dribble, but you kind of dive into the film and you see that he is actually really crafty with kind of getting to his, jumpers in the paint, getting to the basket, and all of the analytics do say that he is like an elite 2-point scorer, even though he looks the part of just kind of a pull-up 3-point shooter. It's going to be kind of questionable whether or not he can defend at the next level, whether or not he's going to be able to create against faster guards because he does look very, very slow, but he's found ways to kind of do it at every level. And I do think that there's a chance that he ends up being one of the better guards in this draft as well. I keep seeing like the group of guards that you're going to hear at the top of the draft is like Acuff, Flemings, LeBaron Philon from Alabama, these guys, and Keaton Wagler. But I do think Sturts is kind of right in that group. If you just kind of look through the numbers, what he did at Iowa last year, this is a guy that looks a lot better. Sorry, plays a lot better than he looks.
Player whose skill level hasn't caught up to his confidence level yet.
I'd say like Elijah Arenas from USC, who is, Gilbert's son, had a really weird freshman season where obviously he got into like a car wreck, had a really ugly, start to the year there, ended up getting injured. And you kind of look back on the season and he averaged like 15 points per game on like sub 35% shooting. Like he was pretty terrible, but he's a 6'6" guard that can handle the ball, that can score. He's very athletic. I'm not sure what he's going to do in terms of actually staying in the draft or going somewhere else, maybe if he transfers. But I do think this is a player that has the potential to be very good. I think he believes he's one of the best players in the draft and just wasn't able to show it at USC, which is, by the way, not the first time that we've had that, like looking back to Isaiah Collier and even Bronny James.
We're going to call this one the Derek Queen test, the big man with skill that I should be paying attention to.
Oh, man, I love Derek Queen. But let's say Hans Steinbach from Washington, like a 6'10", just elite rebounder that has good touch around the basket. Not a good like 3-point shooter yet, but has a nice looking jumper. But the rebounding is just as good as it gets. And I do think he's going to kind of win some people over once they really start diving into the film. And it's a player that definitely has some flaws, but it's just like so valuable what he brings to the glass, the way that he's going to be able to gobble up boards in the NBA. And then when you combine that with his touch and his ability to finish, I think he's going to be a starter simply because of how good he is there.
I'm writing all of these down. I can't wait to dive into the film on these guys. Last one. This is the end of lottery player with the most upside. And I also want to frame it as this, like, let's go 5-6 years from now. We're talking about second contracts for all these guys. And you're like, wow, I should have saw that guy getting a max deal. But somebody end a lottery outside the top 10.
Yeah, I just mentioned him before in that group of guards, and like I feel like people really don't throw him in that top group, but I do. But LeBaron Philon from Alabama, I think he's left out of that conversation because he's a year older than the freshman. Like he's a sophomore. He went back to Alabama to kind of round out his game, but I don't know, like the numbers really kind of speak for themselves. Like he averaged 22 and 5 this year on like 50, 40, 80 shooting splits. He was like the head of the snake for what might have been the best offense in college basketball. And you look even to the tournament and he had 35 points in the loss to Michigan, a Michigan team that we saw was excellent defensively on its way to winning the title. So that's a player that I think is just electric when it comes to creating off the dribble, setting up either for himself or his teammates, and a good shooter too. So I'm just a little confused about why he's not there, because I know that there's, the bias towards smaller guards, but he's 6'4". I think that's kind of where it gets a little bit easier to kind of impact games. And I just think just in terms of just shot creation and, being an engine for an offense, there's a really good chance that he ends up being a good one.
Zach Cohen does great work at RealGM.com. Thanks for jumping on, man.
Thank you.